Okay, welcome back. We've got the classical era loaded up here for you, 500 BCE to 500 CE. You've got Chapter 5, which is Eurasian Cultural Traditions, and we're going to look today at the cultural traditions of India, both Hinduism and then the birth of Buddhism. This can sometimes be a very confusing part for students, so take good notes here. Pause the video and write your notes down. Don't just let the video play and try to write like it's during class. You have the ability to stop this and rewind this and rewatch this if you need to, so do it. First, I want to remind you about Crash Course. This is John Green's creation and his team's creation, and this video on Buddha and Ashoka is very powerful. And it's a very good reminder of what India is like during this time period. India is a problem for most students in the AP test. It seems to get forgotten between China, the Han Empire, and the Roman Empire, between the East and the West, and sometimes we don't have a good feel for India. So it's a good idea to check out this video. Let's look at Hinduism first. The idea of Hinduism is one that is confusing for American students because it's not like you're as familiar with it, and it seems to be foreign in many ways to what we're used to if you're not from Indian culture. Okay, so another way of looking at Hinduism is similar to looking at Confucianism, as this idea that Hinduism is just like being well, it's like being Indian, like Confucianism is like being Chinese. So it's really woven into the fabric of cultural tradition in India. The Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva are located there sitting on lotuses with their respective consorts. And the quote is, "The three greatest Hindu deities are shown here together with their consorts. They are sometimes regarded as the Trinity, who together represent the aspects of one supreme Godhead." So not everyone in India believes in this idea of a monotheistic approach to Hinduism, but there are some who do see that and understand it as being such. So don't be surprised if someone you cross paths with believes that Hinduism is monotheistic. The caste system in Hinduism are intricately connected and woven together. One supports the other, and I would argue that it's difficult for Hinduism to have such a strong hold on what it means to be Indian if the caste system wasn't there. It kind of backs each other up, the caste system in Hinduism itself. There are very many colorful gods in this religion too. They're kind of interesting and fun to study. Many who study Hinduism talk about this one true God idea of a trinity, the Trimurti, with three aspects of universal supreme God. Brahma is the creator, Vishnu the sustainer, and the Shiva's destroyer. Also, women find attractive that there are female gods, because that's a little different than most of these other religions where it's based on more of a patriarchal approach of the strength of men. This is one of the most ancient religions around, and it dates back to the times of the Indus River Valley, and there's no founder or developer. Really, their belief is that Hinduism was dictated down to the people, and it was done so by the god or gods, in whichever case you believe. And the problem with life is samsara, the wandering through multiple lives. This is a problem, and so how do you solve that problem? Moksha is where you have the chance to be reborn, or you will pop out of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, and be ending the samsara cycle. This is a big tent religion, and that means it's the most diverse and accommodating of all the major religions. And the best example is welcoming back Buddha to India as a Hindu incarnation of Vishnu. And the same with Jesus. I mean, there's literally, in Hinduism, it seems there's not a god that they don't somehow like. they'll incorporate whoever they can, and there's a story behind that, because they believe that, you know, it is really their God who is living through the lives of these other great leaders in the world. So religious texts are the Vedas and the Upanishads, and they move to the Bhagavad Gita. And we're going to look at the Bhagavad Gita here in a minute in a little bit more detail. The Indian cultural tradition of Hinduism and / the caste system is an important one to think of. And so I want to focus on our pictures here for a second. That which does not die, Atman, you are that Atman, which is all pervasive. This is this story of understanding life and death. At the left, Shivatektu, I think that's how you say it, is learning about process of death from the Upanishads, one of the many Upanishads, and I won't mispronounce that one for today. Chandogya. I will say it. All my Indian students I've had in the past will just look at me and shake their head like, no, white man, you don't have it right. And I get it. I probably don't. With my accent of half Texan and half Pittsburghese, I'm a big, huge, as they say down here in the South, hot mess. But another way of thinking about moksha, or liberation of your soul or your spirit, is that of water changing form. So you see on the right, bubbling effervescence of like maybe a soda water, or potentially a boiling water from a pit there on the left. As water changes from liquid to gas, you don't really see it after a while, and it just kind of fades. That's the idea of your spirit being able to change forms. So there's this great diversity of gods, spirits, beliefs, practices, rituals, and philosophies. And when the British first get to India, they're not sure what they're seeing. They go from village to village and they say, what is this religion that you're doing? They really don't have a name for it. It's just their cultural tradition of India. And it varies from house to house and village to village in terms of what gods were worshipped and in which ways, but they had some similarities. So that's where Hinduism kind of came about, as this idea of what Hinduism means. Brahma is the world's soul and the final ultimate reality, similar to the Chinese Tao ideas, or the way, or the path. Only Brahma was real, not what humans perceive with their senses. That is an illusion. And as someone who teaches AP psychology, I can tell you, I can kind of see that part of it. I mean, we know that the world around us isn't quite what we think it is, because our senses can trick us in multiple ways. Like right now, what you're watching on the screen is not me sitting in front of you, but the way your mind is working, or your senses may be perceiving this, you may get lost in thought and almost feel like you're sitting in class. That certainly isn't happening, because I'm sitting here looking out the window on a beautiful day. But the final goal of Hinduism, this idea, is to have this Atman union with the Brahman, called moksha, which is your liberation. Another plug here for spending a few minutes of your time watching Stephen Protheroe discuss Hinduism. It's extremely enlightening. If you're interested in learning more about Hinduism beyond what you would need to know for the test, or maybe strengthening what you do know so that it sticks around for the test and for the AP test, certainly, I would check out his discussion captured here on YouTube over Hinduism. Let's look at the poems, hymns, prayers, and rituals that were compiled by the Brahmins, okay, called the Vedas. And there isn't a Darth Veda. Sorry about that. But composed in Vedic Sanskrit, the texts constitute the oldest layer of Sanskrit literature and the oldest scriptures of Hinduism, and they are supposed to have been directly revealed and created by Brahma. So the Vedic texts are organized around 4 canonical collections of metrical material. What does this mean? It's like 4 major volumes, and the first 3 are related to the performance of, or sacrifice of, yajna, or sacrifice, and I'm probably mispronouncing that as well. In the historical Vedic religion, that's the idea here. So the Rig Veda are hymns to be recited by the presiding priest. The Yajurveda are containing formulas to be recited by the officials or officiating priest. The Samsaveda contains formulas to be sung by the priest in the chant form, or he will be the one to sing them in chant form. And then there's the Atharvaveda, collection of spells and incantations, aprotopic charms, and speculative hymns. So it's just like books, maybe, or volumes of the Bible that you might be familiar with. These are different religious texts, prayers, hymns, and rituals. Let's look a little bit at the Bhagavad Gita. And here, I'll read it to you. What I want you to do is, after I read it to you and you get a chance to look at it here, I'll pop up a couple questions at the bottom. Pause the video and think about the answer. Okay? And it's something you're going to need to think about. There's a potential that some of these will be on your test. This is document analysis. So you'll read a document on your test, or the AP test for that matter, and then there'll be questions about it. They're going to have to read through the document and figure it out. You've done questions like these in the past, but some of these can be complicated. So here's the Bhagavad Gita. O Krishna, when I see my own people, eager for battle, my limbs shudder, my mouth is dry, my body shivers, and my hair stands on end. I can see no good in killing my own kinsmen. Krishna replied, do not despair of your duty. If you do not fight this just battle, you will fail in your own law and in your honor. So Krishna, is someone who is sort of disguised as his chariot driver, and you see them here with the chariot and the horses. And this idea that Krishna is the person who changes forms, or the chariot driver changes forms into Krishna and gives him advice. Who is Krishna, and how does Krishna respond? So kind of pause it, think about that, read the text, and figure this one out. And then after you're done with that, resume the video and we'll check out the next part. This is from the Upanishads, the sacred texts that probed inner meaning and sacrifice described in the Vedas. So I'm going to read this to you again, and you're going to have a couple questions after it to answer. So this is from the Katha Upanishads specifically. Higher than the senses are the objects of sense. Higher than the objects of sense is the mind. And higher than the mind is the intellect. Higher than the intellect is the great self. Higher than the great is the unmanifest. Higher than the unmanifest is the person. Higher than the person, there is nothing at all. That is the goal. That is the highest course. So, here's your couple of questions for this. What is the goal, and what is the lowest level mentioned? So consider that and be thinking about it. The lowest level mentioned might be a little tricky. So see what you think. Again, we're looking at Hinduism and Buddhism. So we're going to show you this and introduce to you some Buddhist ideas. Hinduism has the ideas of karma, dharma, yoga, and many gods. And Buddhism, different from that, is the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, and that all people can achieve nirvana. Not just a caste system, but anyone can. They both have this idea of a single force that governs the universe. They both believe in reincarnation, and both believe that humans can merge with a universal force. So here are your questions. According to the Venn diagram above, which religion claims that a single force governs the universe? That seems to be pretty easy, doesn't it? Here is the Eightfold Path. These are ways in which Siddhartha Gautama taught Buddhism. Know the truth. Say nothing to hurt others. Practice meditation. Control your thoughts. Resist evil. Free your mind of evil. Work for the good of others. Respect life. That's 8. So the Eightfold Path. And here's the ideas behind the Eightfold Path and the ideas behind Buddhism. These are called the Four Noble Truths. There's ordinary life is full of suffering, and remember that's what Buddha was discussing quite often. 2, this suffering is caused by our desire to satisfy ourselves. 3, the way to end suffering is to end the desire for selfish goals and to see others as extensions of ourselves. And number 4, the way to end desire is to follow the middle path. So think about this now, and the question will be, there are 2 questions: what causes suffering? And number 2, how can we end suffering according to Buddha? So these are some ideals to think about with the Four Noble Truths, and I would expect you're going to see these same types of questions on your test in many different ways, but this is a way to kind of capture the idea of reading the text, analyzing it, and answering questions. So how does Buddhism compare to Hinduism? Theravada is the teaching of the elders. This is the oldest form of Buddhism. It was a simplified and much more accessible version of Hinduism. More accessible because you don't have the caste system kind of butted up against it and woven within it. Buddhism is separate of the caste system. Buddha as a teacher and a model, but not as a divine God. That's very important to remember. Theravada Buddhism, no real God involved. This is more of a way to achieve personal liberation. Buddhism is more of a philosophy than a religion in this way with Theravada Buddhism. But as we're going to see, it's going to change slightly, especially as it moves into China. Mahayana is the next version of Buddhism. Theravada being the first, Mahayana the second. And I always remember that. We say, well, we may not have time to talk about this today. I'll talk about it with you, Mahayana. It's like tomorrow. See, get it? It's the second version. And it's called the Great Vehicle. So why is it called the Great Vehicle? It retained the view of karma through the Mahayana version of Buddhism. And it means that you have now this way of getting liberation. Buddhavistas are the spiritually advanced and developed people that prolong their own entry into nirvana to assist others through their suffering. So these are like people wandering the earth who have attained a higher level of consciousness, and they're going to help others ease their suffering. They're like Buddhas amongst us. And Buddha himself, in this form of Mahayana Buddhism, becomes himself godlike. That people could follow him in a way that they follow Christ, in a way that they would potentially follow the idea of Allah or Muhammad in Islam. It's a way of thinking of a more deity type approach to religion. So Mahayana Buddhism turned Buddha into a defined figure to whom one could offer devotion. And you see at the bottom left there the Borobudur stupas, which are overlooking a mountain, and for centuries it was deserted. And this is Southeast Asia. We'll look at the picture at the top and also the caption. It says, adopting a sophisticated form of Mahayana, the Great Vehicle, Buddhism, from monastic centers in northern and northeastern India, the Javanese Buddhists in Java created images of the Buddha as well as of members of the Buddhist pantheon. And Tara, or Terra, is pictured above left, and it says above left, but I mean above right. I think I changed this slide. Helps to extend the powers of the Buddha to be, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that, but she is a frequently worshipped. She is frequently worshipped as an independent deity or a savior who helps convey the rays of this Buddhavista or godlike person and the compassion and sufferings that the beings of the world may have. So this is just an attempt for me. You don't have to know all of this about the different you don't have to know her name, especially for the test or anything, but just to understand Mahayana Buddhism, it changes things and adapts things, and it gives really in China, where this really takes hold, it gives the Chinese people a sense of who a god would be to look up to kind of hang their hat on in that way. So this Indian Brahman idea is most similar to the world soul, which is also then similar to the Buddhist notion of nirvana, and that is not that nirvana at the bottom. That's a different kind of nirvana. But still, I think a pretty good one. At the bottom left is your depiction there that's showing the movement towards liberation. Okay, that pretty much wraps it up here, this idea of comparing Hinduism and Buddhism. And I just want to say another way to think of this is Buddhism comes from India. And what does it mean to be a Hindu? It means that you're Indian. So in many ways, that Hinduistic approach to life, this early cultural tradition of the Indian way of life, gives birth to Buddhism. But what Siddhartha Gautama does is he takes away the caste system. He makes it more accessible to other people, and he simplifies it greatly. It's about changing your approach so that you can deal with suffering, to deal with a very, very difficult world. We've learned this throughout this chapter, that the world is a difficult place. And Buddhism is facing that directly and saying this is about ending your suffering, whether it's a way to develop a better ability to deal with suffering on earth now or later when your soul is liberated. Another way to consider what Buddhism is Hinduism light. It's kind of a diet Hinduism. In that way, it might be easier for you to quite understand. And also remember that Buddhism comes from India. This is a very common asked question on the test and on the AP test, is the origins of Buddhism and the ways that Buddhism and Hinduism are in some ways similar and yet different. Hopefully that helped clear things up for you a little bit. As I've talked to you about in class, we'll be hitting this a lot more as we study the chapter and as we go through India in the chapter. So don't be afraid to rewatch this if you need to kind of take some notes and to focus in on really the core ideas of what Hinduism and Buddhism are when you compare them. And also don't be afraid to shoot me an email and just ask questions if you have those, because this is a complicated unit. I want to make sure you're ready for the test as we approach it. So we'll see you next time. And until then, don't forget to be awesome.